We ready to go?
I am waiting on, sorry about the echo. Councilor Stempel or Councilor Wheeler. I don't know if they both replied to Tammy that they would be coming. I know that Councilor Hirschfeld will not be with us tonight from Economic Development. Looks like you have a quorum of viewers, Councilor Forgy.
Anybody else go to the parade? There was a bee theme. All the floats had bees.
No, I didn't get to go, but I bet it was beautiful.
I was just watching the Shriners circle around the cop that was directing traffic on my way over here.
I heard there was a lot of people.
Not as many as 2 years ago when the sun was shining.
Yeah. Well, I expected a lot of people because we didn't have one last year, so people were hungry for something.
There were lots of kids, lots of candy being thrown.
Yeah.
The usual stuff. Should probably tell the people dialing in that we're waiting for a few counselors.
Thank you, Phil. I'm actually texting to get to see if they'll be signing in. So thank you for making that announcement. We're waiting on one more counselor to sign in. I know Counselor Ricketts was coming and Counselor Gilmore, I believe. So one of them could be moved up for us.
Maybe they're at the parade. I saw the mayor.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to give this a couple more minutes because I'm sure that someone's coming. I have great faith. Oh, I heard someone's jumping on right now. I have to wait for one. To have a quorum of each. So did you get to see the whole parade, Phil?
I watched the beginning and then I rode about 3/4 of the way down it before I had to turn around.
Oh, great.
Kelly, are you there?
I apologize for the delay.
While we're waiting, I wanted to mention that I haven't been able to get onto the GIS system from my Mac for several weeks now. It reports that someone's trying to steal my data. I can do it on the town's computer. So
Okay.
anyway, enough of that.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Ricketts, President Ricketts, pardon me.
No problem.
I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:09 p.m. This meeting is being, I just want to make sure I press the record button. Okay. This meeting is being recorded by the Economic Development Committee. If any other persons are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Roll call. Councilor Forgy, do you want to do a roll call of Ways and Means first? Can't hear you.
I'm the one who had it on mute. Sorry. Okay. Doug Mayo,
Yes, here.
Ginny DeSorga,
Here.
John Bottomley. I know he said he was not going to be able to attend tonight. Ed Jarvis. He said he was not going to be able to attend tonight. Chris Forgy. Here, we have a quorum.
Okay, and for economic development, Councilor Elmer,
Here,
Councilor DeSorga is present, and President Ricketts, would you be willing to step in to be our third person?
Yes, I will. No
All
problem.
right, that gives us a quorum. So, thank you, everybody, for coming this evening to hear our discussions on TIFs, which stand for Tax Incentive Financing. It's not an easy subject, so I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to explain the purpose of it and how it's used in Greenfield. It was devised as a method to attract businesses to our towns and cities. The businesses are given a tax break on real estate taxes and personal property taxes in return for agreeing to add jobs and invest more money into their company. The tax breaks are given only on new incentives, so all parties must agree on the value of the company at the time the TIF is awarded. Most or many of Greenfields are awarded for 10 years, during which time the company must file an annual report with the Economic Advisory Committee, a state entity, and our city. These reports outline the business's monetary investments and the job growth achieved during the year. The monetary investments and the job will typically get a total break from taxes the first year, with smaller decreasing ones, i.e. 100%, 90%, 80%. These reports are the city's methods of determining the exact amount of investment that qualifies. Currently, there are 5 TIFs in existence. Ford Toyota, Summit Ice, Greenfield Corporate Center, the Arbors, and Argotech. Decker Machine Work just withdrew from their TIF in December of 2020. Argotech's TIF is for 10 years, which began in 2015, and is an exception because their TIF essentially forgives their personal property taxes 100% for 10 years, and their real estate exemption is minuscule. Greenfield Corporate Center and Summit Ice's TIF expires in the next 2 years. The city needs to make sure they have the correct information because that new growth experienced by these companies during the period of their TIFs is added to the city's calculations of new growth, which will increase the tax levy. As you know, new growth is based on new construction, renovations, exempt property being returned to our tax rolls, and new personal property. Director Adams is handling the TIFs and receiving these reports from the company, so I'm going to turn the meeting over to her for further explanation. And first, I just want to ask Director Adams, before we get started, did I report anything incorrectly there?
Yes, I want to make yeah.
We're good.
I want to, the Summit ICE has, their TIF has expired. Their TIF expired in fiscal year 21.
Very good, thank you.
The TIFs that we have are Argotech, the Arbors, Greenfield Corporate Center, and the Ford Toyota. The Decker Machine Works, they withdrew from their TIF in fiscal year 21.
Very good, thank you. So I'm going to turn this over to you now. I don't know what order you were thinking of going in. I thought the clearest of, most clearly explained was Ford Toyota as far as their graph went, explaining it, but that's where I was going to start, but I'm going to leave that to you to start, okay?
I'm just going to run down the list that you provided on the agenda. So I will go through them one by one. I'll start with Agrotech. This was a TIF that was originally awarded back in 2000 and was originally scheduled to be a 20-year TIF. Yes, a 20-year TIF. And was amended in 2015 for the balance of its life, which would take it through the end of fiscal year 2025. It's a 25% abatement exemption on the real estate portion and 100% on the personal property tax portion. I want to point out that this tax exemption is only on, you made a mention of 5 parcels. They do own 5 parcels. The tax exemption is only applicable to 3 of the 5 parcels, and those are 65 Adams, 53 Silvio Conti, and 49 Greenfield Street. And they committed to do $20 million of capital improvements over the term of their TIF, and they're still in there, so they still have a time to do that. Their annual report, most recent annual report, indicates that they've invested $13,715,000. So,
Excuse me, can you tell us what page we should be looking at?
It's not in the packet.
What page for what? This is just verbally. I'm doing present.
Okay, well, we've got a bunch of spreadsheets. So if you're referring to one of those, that would be helpful.
So they
You're
have,
in the agenda.
All right. Well, here.
Would you care to screen share the Argotech agreement? With that,
I could do that, or what you see is that there are 3 different property cards for this particular TIF.
Okay. I think the most helpful thing on that one might be the chart, Director Adams.
I will get that shared.
Thank you.
And I apologize, you're gonna have to look at it sideways.
I'm just proud of you that you can screen share.
I'm not proud of me that I can't figure out how to change it from to landscape with the Adobe that I have.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not very helpful.
It's also in your packet.
Okay. It's
MJ, this is Sheila Gilmore. I think I can help you fix the view.
Happy to hear it.
If you click on view at the top of the application,
Yeah,
rotate view.
There we go. Does that work?
Looks good.
Excellent.
Thank you.
This is in our packet, you say?
Yes.
yes.
What page? Oh, not the agenda, the packet.
It was in the annual report that was sent by Director Adams.
Okay.
This is not a part of the annual report. This is actually the file that the worksheet that was used for the amended TIF that was amended in January 2015. So you can see that there's the and you'll see there's a column that's called incremental assessed value. That is an exercise of math that we do just to do some projections. The way a TIF is calculated is you take the value before the investment, and then there's a value that's created, an incremental value that's created when you make the investment. And it's in that increased assessment that you actually get the exemption off of. So you don't get the exemption off of the full value, you get the exemption off of the increase in the assessed value because of the investment.
Director Adams, may I ask you while we're on this one, do you want us to ask you questions on this one now? Because I have
Sure.
some questions on this one in particular. But, or we can, no. Is that
No,
good?
you can go ahead and ask.
Okay.
Yes, please ask.
So, the initial value of Argotech, I asked you for the initial assessed value of of several of them.
Right.
And as you can see on the bottom of that page, I don't know if it's possible to make it a little bigger, but on the bottom of that page, it says that the initial assessed value is $14 million.
Correct.
But it's actually the current assessed value of the personal property for Argotech.
Right. Right. That was
Okay.
my mistake. I pulled that off. In fiscal year 2015, the actual assessed value, if you take the value from the 3 property cards from the assessor's office, is $6,282,600.
Okay, that's very similar to what I had. And the only exemption that they actually were to receive on their real estate would have been $225.10.
Understand that that is a math exercise that's done by the TIF committee that is a projection. I'll share with you that I've only been working on the TIFs for the last year and a half, that these came to us already calculated and in files. So I have not spent a lot of time going back and really understanding how they work these spreadsheets in earlier days. I understand how we do the worksheets now, but this is a different format of worksheet that was used several years ago.
This was actually a complicated one, and unlike the others, because it really is it's one where we are just exempting the personal property. But where this is where we're at, I'm going to start there, okay? The original TIF agreement didn't have a copy, and neither did Deborah Bronski from the Mass Office on Business Development. I agree with the 3 properties. Looking at the chart, again, Director Adams, the total amount of real estate exempted over 10 years is $3,095.13. Does everyone see that at the bottom? That's the bottom figure that was to be exempted.
Yeah, that's the amount of taxes that were exempted.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So in 2019, they paid taxes with a tax rate of 22.36 of $140,051, when actually, including their 2 other parcels, when actually they should have paid $173,708, a difference of $33,567. Because it looks to me as if we were exempting more than that. I'm going to go on. They actually underpaid the 2 years following that, in 2020 by $11,330. And although they're down, they're actually on the NASDAQ, and although they're down a little on the tax exchange, their annual profit is approximately $150 million. You were the one getting the annual reports. Initially, the value of the personal property was $14 million. Since that time, they've invested $13,714,846. Of the $20,000 they agreed to invest, do you have any idea, or does Assessor Mew, how much their personal property is worth now and how much it might have increased during this period?
I didn't even look at their personal property because I wasn't aware that that was something we were going to be discussing. So I can look at that and get.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Anyone can ask any questions anytime, as far as I'm concerned, if that's okay with Director Adams and Assessor Mew.
Director Adams, can you explain the exempted annual personal property tax? Is that standard practice that the town exempts personal property taxes?
I currently, we do not. When we're working with TIFs, we do not do that now. I don't know what prior practice was. What we have is several TIFs that have historically, we have a notation, it's part of their TIF. And in this one in particular, you can see that 100% was exempted of the personal property tax, 25% the real estate tax on the incremental value was exempted. I would not say that's current standard practice. I don't think we have a standard practice. We've been working on trying to develop a TIF policy over the last year and a half. So, but what we've largely been looking at is the real estate property itself and have not had discussions about the personal property tax as an exemption.
If I could
I see
follow up.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So my understanding from looking at this is that the city did not collect $3.7+ million over 10 years in personal property taxes from the owner of this property, which I'm still sort of mystified by that and shocked. So that's a big number, especially if it's not standard practice and it's not something we're doing now. It sort of stinks. But I'm happy to hear an explanation. Well, I understand it happened before you came. That's what you're saying.
We inherited the TIFs that were already on record, yes.
Got it. Thank you.
All set. I'm going to go on to Council Forgy. Council Forgy, go ahead, please.
Okay, I have a few questions, please. You mentioned that there was an original TIF in 2000. It was amended in 2015. So my two questions related to this is, why was it amended? Number one, if you know that, and I understand that might be before you were here.
Mhm.
And is it general practice to amend a TIF once that calculation has been agreed upon for a specific period of time? Is it legal to amend it, or should you put another TIF in place for another growth piece?
Well, you clearly have the right, I mean, it clearly was amended. The EACC approved the amendment.
Okay,
It did not change when they did the amendment. The changes that I did read through the amended agreement to see what might have prompted that. And it looked like there was some sort of legal change that was done so that they could take advantage of a state tax incentive. So we had to modify the TIF language. I am not a tax attorney. I'm not a TIF tax attorney.
sure.
But my quick read of it was that the amendment was made so that they could access another aspect of financial incentives that were being made available. And that it did not change our schedule of TIF. We did not change the 25% real estate exemption or the 100% personal property tax exemption for the balance of the TIF. The only thing is it sounded like it changed some of the language.
A follow-up, if I may, please. All of the TIFs that we're talking about this evening, these are local TIFs. They have nothing to do with the state involvement at all on any, we used to call them SIFs. I don't know what they call them now. But getting the state involved would allow you, that would be a joint operation. It may be a state TIF involved and a local TIF involved at the same time. And so because I'm seeing TIF only, I am assuming that it was just on a local level that we did this.
The TIF process, even if it's a local only TIF,
Okay,
it has to be approved by the EACC, the Economic Assistance Coordinating Council. So even if we decide to do one at a local level, it has to go up there and it isn't authorized until it's run through their process.
but the state did not, to the best of your knowledge, the state did not, in some instances, they come in and they say, we want this business to succeed in Massachusetts, so we want to be involved in this as well, but they were not on that level.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
My sense is that we work very closely with the Mass Office of Business Development. So when I have a business that's looking to have a TIF discussion, we very quickly involve Deb Baratsky, who's our regional director on that.
Okay,
There are conversations that she has with the business to make a decision, especially if it's a manufacturer, that sometimes there's an alternate path that doesn't involve a local TIF that is more attractive for manufacturers.
okay.
But I rely on her technical expertise about guiding the business about which way they're going to go with it. If they're going to step into the local TIF process or if they're going to do an alternate route for a different type of economic incentive.
And just to be clear, with the new TIF policy that's being worked on at this point, there is not a category for personal property, because in some instances, the personal property would be necessary. For instance, at a milk processing plant or something like that, you would want to include some sort of an offset for all the equipment they have to bring in to build out the processing plant. So is it totally off the table, or is it just being viewed with a little bit more restraint?
It hasn't made it to the agenda yet. We've been really focused on trying to create a baseline for our general statements about when we will engage in TIFs and for what type of projects. So we haven't gotten to the nuts and bolts or had a discussion about the personal property tax.
Okay, thank you very much.
May I speak on this? Because I actually, in the year that this TIF was renegotiated, that was the year that the tax law changed, enabling the personal property to be exempted. This corporation had done almost all of its building on which we had given it a TIF. So it's a multi-million dollar corporation. I'm sure they have many CPAs and lawyers in working for them. And that was a wise decision on their choice to renegotiate this TIF because we are exempting 100% of their personal property. I think two things. It's very important that we actually have that number known. I don't know if they're doing a form of list or what, but and I realize that that's not a something that we are privy to, but in 4 years from now, that dollar figure is going to return to the tax rolls because it's been exempted for 10 years. I would think it would be 15 million plus a part of the 20 million that they've invested into it, because as you can see in the left-hand column, and I can tell from the building permits, they have not been investing in the buildings anymore. The buildings were completed. So we don't know at this point. You have never gotten anything, Director Adams, on what their personal property is worth now?
No, I have not. I received their annual reports, which I download from the state when they upload those.
Okay.
I have a question.
Absolutely,
If I may.
Director Gilman.
Kim or MJ? Well, probably Kim, or Assessor Mew. Investment is not indicative of assessment, just as values on building permits are not indicative of the value of an assessment. Can you explain that difference, Kim, or if you would,
Sure.
please?
So the value of the investment and the number on the building permit is an estimate. Also, so if you invest in, let's use the personal property since we're talking about that. You invest in a machinery, say, as we've already used for a milk plant. You may have to also invest in the labor costs that it costs to put that into your building. That is not part of your assessed value. When looking at a building, if you're building something brand new, you may estimate that it's going to cost you $500,000 to build a building, but that's including, labor, wages. That's including demolition of something that might be already there. So the estimated cost or the actual cost of building something or putting personal property into a building is not necessarily the assessed value. When looking at the building, for example, if we've had to, someone has had to remove any portion of a building or they've had to remove a whole building, that does not add to the value of their assessment. So, as I said, if they have had to remove an entire building, but then the cost to build something is $500,000, but they've already spent, say, $50,000, doesn't mean their assessment is going to be $550,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just wanted to make people understand that there's not a one-to-one relationship with a building permit value or even what this company necessarily has invested to the assessed value.
Right. Right, and again, along with the building permits, like we've discussed, I think in the past, that the estimated cost listed on the building permit is an estimate. Sometimes that's made by the business or homeowner, sometimes that's made by a contractor. And that's just an estimate. It could go in multiple directions. That estimate could involve things that don't have anything to do with assessment. Removal of asbestos, having to put extra wiring in, maybe changing from knob to, yes, knob and tube to current electrical. Obviously, if you have current electrical, it's worth more, but in assessment purposes, that's a very minuscule number. Whereas for your pocket and for the estimated building cost,
Right.
that's
My next question, more related to the TIFs, is that the incremental piece, the base piece, also increases. Like it goes up in value each year too. So it isn't all when you look at the property as a whole, the base value increased too, and that gets backed out, correct?
correct.
All right, thank you.
I actually have a graphic that shows that well.
That would be great, MJ.
Now that I know how to rotate views. There, now you can see it. So you can see this explains how a TIF works, that there's an underlying value of the existing property, and that over time, that value grows a little. There's some adjustments to that. And then what you're looking at here is that the blue part is the part that has the added tax, of which there's a part of that is exempted.
I agree. That's a great chart on what's supposed to be happening. I love that. That was from that ABCs. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm. And the nice thing is you see that when the TIF is over, you get the full taxes on the full valuation of it all.
Unfortunately, this business that sold for $7 million a year and a half ago, which then sold for $14 million, has actually decreased in assessment. So I'm hoping that at the end, the real estate part of it will have increased. But I do want to point out that we not only exempted all of the personal property taxes since the inception of this TIF, but in 2019, we exempted $38,188 of real estate tax, and in 2020, we exempted $32,751 of real estate tax, where we agreed to exempt $900.40 for fiscal year 2019, and we agreed to exempt $1,125.50 of real estate tax. So they actually have caught a double break there. So I'm sure we'll be catching that up. We can't. I don't think we actually can catch it up, but I think we just need to be aware of that. Okay.
Mhm.
And the value has not increased. Actually, despite all of this, the value of this property has decreased. And we don't know what the personal property is worth.
I pulled them off your records. Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
ready to move on to the arbors?
I
Yes.
have one more question, if I could. I'm still stuck on the $3 million in personal property taxes that on a property, if I'm looking at it correctly, the property at 53 Silvio Conter Center is valued at $3 million. So why? How does that work? What personal property taxes is this owner being spared on that adds up to more than the property's worth. This seems unusual to me. And then I guess the final question is, if it is unusual or wrong or illegal, is there a way to claw that back? Can the city get that money back?
So
Good
the
question.
personal property has nothing to do with the value of the real estate property. Personal property is something completely separate. Personal property is equipment. So for example, just sitting here looking at equipment that's sitting in the office, it would be chairs, computers, desks, calculators. You know, in the case of a business where there might be coolers, there might be equipment to fill bottles or, you know, so on and so forth. So the value of those items have nothing to do with the value of the building.
If I could follow up, then what, in the case of 53 Silvio Conti Drive, what is the value that those 300,000 plus, not having to pay that each year? On what value is that based? If it's not the property?
How do you generate the value of the personal?
Well, the value of the personal property would be, so in a case that it is taxed at 100% fair market value, we would go out, we would do an inspection of the equipment. We have specifically someone at RRG who this is their specialty, so they know how to value these things. We also look at their form of lists and they tell us what they have for equipment. Some people, corporations such as this would probably put a value on something, their machinery, but there's also certain machinery that's exempt from personal property tax. Personal property tax is quite complicated, so I don't want to get too far involved with that right now, but that might be where you feel like there's a lesser value because there's equipment that isn't taxable via the state. I don't know if this is answering your question because, like I said, personal property can be quite complicated, but the original value of their personal property probably came from form of lists and inspections that were done on the property before the TIF was implemented.
So that stuff's somewhere back in history and we don't have access to it, is that right?
We have access to it as long as it was put into the computer system or put into a file.
I'm looking at the GIF file, and I'm looking. Can you point me to where the personal property was assessed?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're looking at.
Okay, I'm looking at it's page. It's in our agenda. And I'll have to find the page. It's very hard to.
It's in our agenda. There's no personal property in our agenda.
Right. Okay. So
The things that are in our personal property are real estate record cards.
okay. So we'd have to ask for something else to see the personal property that was assessed.
Correct.
Okay.
But you do see on the sheet that's up and being shared,
Yeah.
which was the local incentive valuation for the amended Agritech, that there's a statement that the current assessed value of the personal property for Agritech is 14 million.
Right.
Their personal property. That was at the inception.
Right, that was in 2015 when they were making these calculations. Yes.
Right. So we don't have any really idea what it is right now. And Councilor Ford, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused, and I used to deal with TIFs, so I know it's not an easy subject for anybody to really understand. Okay, so we go ahead and we give a TIF based on a real estate value. And we're also seeing that there's a TIF based on personal property. So when the package is put together, everybody to agree on the amount, the dollar amount, and so much will be real estate and so much will be personal property, what happens to those figures? Are they combined in any way so they go out to as part of assessment package? Are they held separate? I think, Kim, you mentioned that personal property, you would have a representative from RRG who would go out and do personal property assessment. But based on what Phil is saying, who's monitoring that piece of the TIF? And I want to make a broader statement. It's not intended for, as criticism. But here's where I'm coming from. I know the law has changed since I was in office. I get that. However, it was always the responsibility of the council to go ahead and put together incremental TIFs with the planning department and everything else. And as part of all of this, the premise was that we are being asked by a business who wants to grow and expand, that we are actually going to take a risk on them. We, being the taxpayers in Greenfield, we're going to say it's okay for you not to pay this much tax to us for so many years. And in exchange, your part of the bargain is to fulfill everything you're talking about on your list. So I have to question the personal property piece here. I get the real estate piece, but how does the personal property piece, where does the responsibility for the reporting of that value come from, and where is the taxpayer assured that everything that's happening on this TIF is happening correctly? So I'm, again, it's a 40,000 foot view, which is part of my problem, but I'm just very confused about all of this. And then my expectation way back when was, when the TIF was complete, the town would not only have a viable business, this was the goal, have a viable business with employees and have facilities that were, top grade facilities to get the job done. And we'd have a very meaningful industry manufacturer business on our tax rolls at a real solid tax rate. So we're granting it to them to give them viability. And my question is, where does the switch happen where we are now receiving the benefits of helping the business and not actually just bearing the brunt on the backs, bearing the brunt of businesses coming in and everything else at the detriment to the taxpayers. So maybe that's more than anybody needs to know right now, but I felt like I have to get it out there. Thank you.
President Ricketts, yes.
I
thank
can
you.
respond to that a little bit as well. I think that, all of us, I think, agree that in the future, these 100% personal property exemptions are just nonsense. I think that when it comes to your question as when do we get some relief with these 100%, we don't until it's over. Because we can't, it doesn't matter what the value of their personal property is. It could be $10, it could be 500 million. Doesn't matter. It's 100% exempt. So we don't see relief until the end with that. I think, with the real estate, it's obviously different. But I think that's something that the TIF committee has been heavily discussing about personal property tax, and maybe not using that in the future unless it's a weird circumstance or absolutely necessary where, like we had said before, a company is coming in with all brand new equipment into an empty building. That might be something different. But I think, just to sort of follow up with that a little bit, it's definitely, it's frustrating at this point. I don't know which one of you said it, but it's sort of a bummer to see that much money not being able to be collected. But again, I think, these are those things that were handed to us and we have to do what we can do with them. And in the future, hopefully that won't occur. So I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, thank you, Kim. I appreciate your honesty on that one. Very much so. Thank you.
And your point is well taken, that the intention of a TIF is not to give a company a free ride. The idea is that there's a shared vision of a future that's mutually beneficial. And is there a way that a community can participate in making something financially feasible so that a company can expand its operations, its employment, and its payroll in our local economy?
Thank you.
President Ricketts, you're on. Go
Yes,
ahead.
okay. So I wanted to say, I think it may be worth digging into this a little bit because I know Arcotech has expanded 3 times and they've come to council for TIFs. And the last time they came for a TIF, they backed out at the last moment. They didn't want it. And I just remember that raising red flags. Like, why don't they want a TIF? They're really expanding. They're adding on. And, they have to hire a certain amount of people. TIFs, have all the rules. And that's why the state is so involved in it to make sure, everything is caught. So even if the town, something happens and it falls between the cracks of the city, the state should be able to catch it too. So I have a feeling that during the last time they expanded, when they backed away and didn't want a TIF, maybe there was some deal made or maybe something was going on then. And that's why we're not getting some of the funding that it obviously looks like we should be getting and we're not for some reason. So, yeah.
Penny, can I respond? I think that what happened is a couple of years ago, the regulations around TIFs changed, along with some other financial incentives that the state was able to offer directly, particularly to manufacturing operations. So I think that if there's a manufacturer who has a TIF, from everything I have gleaned, it seems like it's more favorable for them just to do a separate calculation with the state and to get a state tax credit as opposed to a local TIF.
Yep.
I can confirm that with Deb Baranski. She's our regional, but as I've listened to her talk with businesses about it, she actually does an envelope, back of the envelope. Well, I shouldn't call it that. She does a calculation with them to see which path makes the more sense to them. So,
Councilor Forgy.
Thank you. And Bill, you alluded to this a few conversation bits back. In any of these TIFs that we're viewing tonight, is there any clawback clause in any of them? Because that's customary. It's almost like putting, it's basically saying, if you can't perform on this and you do so consistently for a number of years, we're going to stop this TIF and we're going to take back what you have already given us. And that happens more in manufacturing than it does in a smaller business piece. But I wonder if the contracts have clawback clauses in them.
I'm going to jump in here because we're talking about that now. In general, the ones, it states even through the state's general agreement that if they don't meet the guidelines, it can be renegotiated. In this particular case, however, they have more than met the number of jobs that they have brought to the town. They have more than met the amount that they are investing into the business. But what has happened is they're getting 100% off of their personal property, which we have no idea what that is assessed for. And the property value, the real estate property value, has decreased despite them putting in millions and millions of dollars. It sold for $14 million. It's assessed for $7,778,000. That's the 5 properties. Despite the fact that into those buildings, et cetera, they've put more than that. and I know that things depreciate, but this particular one, I find the most disturbing because they are getting it both ways. So maybe we could just ask for our next meeting, the next joint meeting that we're having, because this won't be the last one, that we'd have a better idea of what their personal property is assessed at, because I'm sure it's going to be a lot more than 14 million, because that would be great, because we're going to be able to put that back on the tax rolls in 4 years. And but any idea why the real estate is not assessed higher?
Yes, because that $14 million sale, which we have talked about a few times,
Mhm.
was multiple parcels, including other things other than real estate. I cannot break out multiple parcels
Mhm.
when there's a sale like that. So that is not an arm's length sale.
Right. No, I know I know that it's not an arm's length. I'm just saying that when we saw the picture with the increasing, I loved that picture where we saw the increased incremental value. What's happened with this is just exactly this. Yes, the wedge. And I actually can see that isn't really what happened in this particular case. So maybe we should go on. I don't know if people have more questions on this. Yes, Counselor Elmer.
I just wanted to check if my math is correct. If the personal property is assessed at 14 million and it's taxed at 22 point something percent, over 10 years, that comes out to 3 point something million, which is roughly the 100%. If I got this right, is that where the 100% personal property? Okay. All right. I'm happy. It makes a little more sense to me. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions on this one? So maybe just for our next meeting, I think I personally am quite interested in what we have for their personal property assessment, because that figure will return to the tax roll. So I'd be curious what that is. I'll just leave that out there, and I'm going to let you, Director Adams, go on. But I just wanted to say one other thing for our assessor, our assessor, because we got right into this, and I didn't really have a chance to say something. That the Department of Revenue says you have an integral role in the TIF process. And I've served on this city council since the beginning. And this is the first time I've ever received a copy of the annual report. It's so complicated, and without the report, almost impossible to understand. I just wanted to say I can't imagine the difficulty you faced, especially since you were attending school during the process of this. And I know last year we only had one TIF meeting, and I just wanted to thank you for taking this on during a time when you were doing two things. And I didn't get a chance to say that at the beginning. I had that written, so I just wanted to say that out loud. But I'm going to let you, Director Adams, go on to whatever you have up next. Thank you. Okay.
All right. So the next piece is the Arbors. The Arbors is a residential property assisted living down on Meridian Street. It was granted a 20-year TIF that started in fiscal year 2007. And it decreased from 60% down to 20% exemption. And that's where we are. We're in the last 5 years of it right now, where they have a 20% exemption on their real estate. They invested $10.5 million in the acquisition, the building and construction and equipment for that site. Any questions on that?
I have
a
one
chart like you
question.
had
Oh,
for
go
the
ahead.
last one? Do you have a spreadsheet like you had for the last one? No.
I do not. This was an odd one, quite honestly. When I came on board, the city of Greenfield had a record of it, but the state did not. So we cleared things up with the state, and I have precious little records on this one. Well, I have precious little records on the TIF. There's a whole file of a lot of correspondence. But this is what I have. This is probably the most succinct TIF that I have. And it's only on the real estate. Okay. Yes.
Yes, Counselor Forgy.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear that it's rather straightforward because I was in office at the time the TIF was negotiated. So I'm glad to hear that.
And I think it's a requirement of the fund, it's a low-income housing tax credit deal. So I think that was a requirement of them receiving those tax credits.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a lot in this project. We cleared out some, brownfields, and it was handed over to the first mayor of Greenfield by the Board of Selectmen, who worked very hard on that. And at this point, I'm heartened to say I'm very glad it's straightforward. It seems to be doing its job, and thank you.
So this one will be ending when?
2026, I believe.
Correct. Yes, fiscal year 2026.
And it was a static amount?
No, it decreased. It's been decreasing for it. In the
Okay.
first year, there was a 60% exemption. It's gone down in year 8 to 11, in 2008 to 2011, it was a 50%. 2012 to 2016, it was 40%. 2017 to 2021, it was 30%, and it's now at 20% through 2026.
Right. So the last time it decreased, have we reported the new growth each time that it decreased? And would we perhaps be able to see that at our next meeting?
Unfortunately, when looking at this from the past, it does not appear that new growth has been reported.
New growth has not been reported. Okay. And we can just report new growth when?
So new growth, if we realize in the fiscal year that we've missed something, we have until the middle of June to actually fix that. So at this point, unfortunately, with those prior years, that's not something we can go back on.
So we lost all of that new growth.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right,
So going forward, my question would be, so going forward now, even though there's a smaller dollar amount in place, will we be looking at that as part of new growth?
So we can't look at it at this point until the 20% is over with and the TIF has ended, because it's a 20% for the next few years. So unfortunately, that we won't be able to pick up new growth from this particular one until then. Looking at some of the others, however, that will be something that we will be looking at each year. But anyone that has a set amount for every single year, we can't pick up any new growth on that. Set amount, I mean the same amount for each year.
And that is because of why?
Why can't we go back?
No, not necessarily why can't you go back, but if you have the same amount each dollar year, how about on year 2, you recognize it's the same dollar amount. You cannot recoup anything from the next few years that
So it's the same. So it's 25% each year. If it changes to 15%, then we can pick up new growth there. It's the reduction in the percentage that is given. So if a TIF, just to use round numbers, if a TIF starts out at 50%, then this following year it's 40%. So there's a 10% range that we can pick up. Then it goes to 30%. So then we can pick up that other percent, then so on and so forth. But if
I
it
got it.
stays 25% each year, then it's not actually, I mean, although the value should be adjusting because of market, rates and all that, it's still not, the percentage of the TIF is the same.
I got it. Thank you very much.
And when was the last time that this decreased?
I don't have it in front of me. Do you happen to have that?
The arbors?
Yeah.
5 years ago.
Was it 5?
Well, let's see. It's.
I think it was.
Oh.
It's been in its last year, I think, for my
There it is.
15th.
Yeah. Well, that's 15 Meridian.
Oh.
Hold on. Yeah.
17, 27, 20, 27.
80%.
3, 4, 5,
There it is.
2012.
Do you have when it went down to 20%?
I like the card. Oh, what year it went down to
Yeah.
20%? Yeah,
Oh, this year.
this year.
This year it
Fiscal
should go down.
22.
Oh, so we can pick up the new growth for this year.
Oh, great.
So that's great.
Excellent.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I wasn't clear. I apologize. Yeah, so this year we would be picking up the difference between the 30 and the 20%.
Although
Great.
it's declined in value this year. Does that matter, Assessor Kim?
Yes, it would. So depending on what the original value of the location was, then if it's less than that, which I don't think that it is, if it's less than the base value, then they wouldn't get the discount this year. As for new growth wise, it's still going to be new growth because it's a different percentage, even if it's a lesser value.
Okay. So would you be able to report that to us at some point? Because I think that together, we should all work together on this to make
Yeah,
sure.
I
that
think I won't be able to
We'll
give you
have
that
to-
figure
yeah.
for a while because we won't have our finalized or our even, we haven't done any work in the computer system yet. It's all been permit inspections and studies right now. So I don't have anything in the computer system, but as soon as I get a number, I can certainly bring that forth to give us an estimate of what the growth on this one would be. Because although it's gone down last year, it may or may not have gone down. But we don't know what the value is going to do this coming year yet.
Right. And do we look at inflation with these? I mean, our houses have all, people's personal homes have increased with inflation. Does that usually happen? Is there an inflation rate with these businesses under the TIF? Or?
Sometimes there is. This is sort of a tricky one because, as you know, I mean, these probably don't sell that often. So the inflation rate with houses is, people are constantly buying and selling houses, whereas these types of things, you don't necessarily, it doesn't follow the housing market.
Yeah.
So certainly something that is looked at, though. I know that this particular one has, I think there might be one I think there's one in Northampton, but there's also one in Amherst. And so we would look at those as well because it's those are the nearest of this kind and it's the same company. So if we look to see if any of those sold, so there's a whole process that goes with it. As for, does it follow exactly with housing? No. But sometimes I'm sure there's an influx of people that want to buy things such as this or other corporations as well.
Because basically this works to the city's benefit if it looks like that wedge, that little wedge that we were shown at the beginning, where it's
Right.
increasing in value. So I'm sure you'll be letting us know what that figure is. Yes, my favorite one. How does the TIF? This is how it's supposed to work, and so we'll be looking forward to that. So I'm going to let Director Adams go on.
Okay, so there's no more questions? Oh, I'm sorry. I think
Yes, I'm sorry.
Could I just ask for a definition of terms? What is new growth and how does it differ from growth?
So new growth is when there is an addition to a building or there is a building altogether. So basically, and those aren't I shouldn't say that specifically because it could be other items as well. But new growth is basically new space, new items. And by new space, I mean could be a new building, new square footage. Something that is not new growth is an updated bathroom, kitchen, so on and so forth. If you're looking at a building and it's been ripped to the studs and then put back together, that's new growth. But it's basically if the space is already there, it's not necessarily new growth. So there's a fine gray area there, but the gist of growth is new square footage, more space. It could be livable, could be exterior, but it's expanding the property.
Thank you very much. That was very clear.
And also, any exempted property that
Yes.
returns to the tax rolls is new growth, which is why this is
Yeah.
such an important thing. And I think Director Gilman actually might be able to speak to this, but the real problem with missing any new growth is that it is added to the tax levy and it never disappears. Am I correct on that, Director Gilman? You're on mute, I think. I still can't hear you.
Yeah, no, it wasn't clicking. It's added to the value. I believe though, when you say it doesn't disappear, it still fluctuates with, and Kim can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but it still fluctuates in changes throughout the years. The way new growth works for the city is basically, and we can go through this again. I went through it the last budget process, but basically the new growth will add to our excess capacity, which is a good thing.
Mhm.
And looked upon favorably that we aren't taxing to the max. But Kim, once that new growth is added, it's there, but it can change in value, correct? Yeah, that's what I thought.
So I think, Ginny, once we pick up the new growth, what I see that you are not agreeing with Liz. Once we pick up the new growth, that figure is put into the system for that fiscal year. What Liz I think is trying to say is after it's in there, the properties should fluctuate with market values and so on and so forth, and the values should be adjusted yearly. But as for the actual figure of this is X amount of dollars that we have this year, if we catch it before a certain period of time, if we've missed something, then we can collect it. But if we've realized now, like we just figured out, that some of these increase or decreases in TIF amounts were not picked up in new growth, fortunately, that's lost forever. And also another just really important thing to think about is personal property is a huge portion of our new growth. So these properties that have 100% reduction on their personal properties for the TIFs is not necessarily helping us until its final year and we can get it back on there. And then we get the full growth of that that personal property.
Yeah.
And in some cases, hopefully it's blocked.
I just want to tag on to that because Kim is right on from what I saw historically when I looked at things was the years that we had a lot of high new growth was personal property. It was the electric companies putting in poles and running broadband and all that sort of thing. We had very good years those years.
Mm-hmm.
And you only have a certain amount of time, like a year and a half, even with an amended growth, even with an amended LA 13, you can only put it on for so long. I agree with you that the value of it depreciates, of course, it's like the value of a car depreciates. But
Right.
it does add to the tax base, and it's unfortunate that we have not been adding that, but onward, let's go on to the next one. If anybody has any further questions on this one?
Right. We'll talk about the Greenfield Corporate Center.
Mhm.
The next time I do not have a Ginny, I know I saw your email. I did not get the agreement and the report out to you. But I do have it here.
Okay. Maybe you can send that to me
I
at
will.
some point.
But right now I will share it.
Perfect.
I am sharing it. There we go. So this is a tax, a TIF that was also amended. And where it stands right now, the original one was a 20-year, it was amended. It looks like a couple of times. It grants a 10% exemption that runs through the end of fiscal year 2022.
So again, this will be one that we're picking up next fiscal year for new growth.
Very good. So we'll be able to collect 10% of whatever that new growth is. This just did recently decrease in value, but that won't have anything to do with that, will it?
I think that actually what you might be seeing in the decrease is actually not an actual decrease in value, because the record cards that have been posted on the website are including the TIF. So I'm
Oh, good.
wondering if maybe that might be what the value that you're seeing decrease, because I doubt that every single one of these has decreased.
Right, is that 143?
Oh, yes, that certainly could be. I
Yeah,
just
and
love
so I
to know
think
what we're
that
going to
might be where we're getting a little, because at first I'm like, no way, it didn't decrease, and then I see what you're saying. The reason that is the way it is because I have to report the value to the state, including the TIF. And in order for me to do that, I have to make sure that it's written on the record card this way. So in my files, I have the market value as well as this. And I wish there was a different way to show it on these cards, but unfortunately there isn't. So I think that might be what we're seeing.
So you have a different value than $1,951,000.
That's what they were taxed on because of the agreement. But I think that the market value is different. So please don't quote me on that for the moment, but I think that's what we're seeing differ.
We're all in this together, but 2 years ago, I want to point out that it was $2,410,900. It's down roughly $500,000 from 2 years ago. So that's kind of just so that we're on this one, we really have high hopes of capturing that new growth. Okay.
Any other questions on that particular TIF?
And that one included both 143 Munson Street and 201.
Right, there were two parcels that are associated with that TIF.
It's not 201.
I'm sorry, it's
130, it's two parcel numbers.
it is 143.
143 and 101.
I'm sorry, I did
201 is
ask
Second
201.
Machine.
My apologies. It is 101. You're right,
101 and
Jenny.
143, yes.
Oh, so it was included both. Oh, well, we'll have to be looking at that also.
No. I just made a mistake on wording. The TIF is including both properties under Greenfield Corporate Center is 143 Munson Street and 101 Munson Street.
Okay, so maybe we'll get that record card on 101 also.
Yeah, I think you have it.
We have 201.
Okay.
Did I not supply 101? I thought I did.
The one you sent me was the 201.
If I did not, I will certainly get that to you all. I apologize if I didn't.
Oh, no problem. We're in this together.
I think
We
it's
just
in.
want to make it right for our city.
This is the
wanna,
one that you emailed me.
I maybe didn't email you all of them. I just want to make sure they're in the packet because if they're not, then I will certainly get that to you tomorrow.
No problem.
143 is on page 17 in the agenda.
I just want to look for that one because I apologize if I probably saved it in my file to send and then just didn't pick it up. Because I think it's not there. So I will get that. I'll put that on my notes and I'll get that emailed out to you tomorrow. I apologize that didn't make it into the packet.
No problem.
Hop over and talk about. Okay. So Summit Ice is next on the list. Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay. And Summit Ice expired in in fiscal year 21. So that's no longer a current TIF.
And we will be getting new growth.
Okay. That's great. Would that be a significant amount of new growth?
So it was getting a 20% reduction for 10 years. So it'll be whatever the 20% was.
Okay.
I mean, that's a pretty decent amount. A 20% is a pretty decent amount.
All right. Yeah, I'm backwards on this. I got it. All right, the next one is the Ford Toyota. It's also known as Jim Bob, which is the property ownership name. It's a 10-year TIF that runs from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 26. So it's off at 100% TIF exemption and decreases 10% a year. I want to point out that the TIF is only applicable to the phase 2 building.
Is one of those Ford and the other Toyota?
Sure.
I don't know. There is very clearly, if you look at the dealership, one side is Ford and one side is Toyota. So I would think, though, it might have something to do with the space that they actually work on the vehicles. I do notice when the building was brand new, clearly the front was beautifully done, and then the back, I think, is where they were lacking their space. And I think what's in the back is their garage bays and so on and so forth.
And then there's also a personal property tax exemption.
Yes.
Right. And on this one, in the latest year, it looks like they're, according to what we got from Treasurer Varner, it looks like their personal property was worth $54,000, which I'm really no expert on that, but I've read through a lot of I know that it's anything if you turn the building upside down and shake it out and not attached, that would be considered personal property. It doesn't have anything to do with any of the automobiles, but they also have a service station in the back there. And I know the larger equipment, like the lifts that go up and down, et cetera, that is included as personal property. So was that reported as new growth? Did we report?
I would hope so. I didn't look at the personal property of portion of this particular one, to be honest with you, but I would hope that it would have been,
Right.
let's
And
see.
would you have been the person that would be?
Okay, so fiscal year 2021 should have gotten a 0%. So yes, if I apologize, I didn't look at the personal property, so I can get back to you on that. I don't know how to put in a percentage on the personal property without actually having it in front of me. So I don't want to answer this question right now because I don't know without it being here. So I will get back to you on that as well.
Because we might even be able to do an amended growth from what I read, so that we could,
Right.
cover 2 years on that.
And actually, this one being, if this one has not been, if the 25% reduction ended up staying on the final, on last year, we could pick up the new growth and will pick up the new growth for this year. But I don't want to speak to that because I'm sorry, I didn't look at that and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not
Okay.
sure about that.
Okay.
All right.
So I have a question on the calculations on this one, but first I want to ask, when Director Adams, when you get these annual reports, they go to just you. Do you distribute them to anybody else?
I do. I distribute them to Kim because technically the company is supposed to send them to Kim, but we end up going on the state's reporting. That they have a website where those get uploaded, and we actually print them out ourselves. So I go looking for them, and then when I get them, I give a copy to Kim.
I'm going to request that, and I imagine Councilor Forgy probably feels the same way, that perhaps we get the copies on all of these every year also.
Yeah, we can certainly arrange that. And I want to share with you that, Kim and I have been talking about the tips over the last year and a half about first getting our arms around them and trying to see the paperwork and understand how they work in our systems. But also secondly, how we monitor them and make sure that the companies are doing what they committed to do in exchange for this relief from their taxes. And that's been a very interesting and animated conversation, especially as we start to take a look at the yearly reports and sort of drill down on what the definitions mean, because it's been a bit of an evolving process to understand what everyone thought they were doing in 2015 and what they're reporting now, and particularly as we talk about the job counts. I mean, that's been my challenge. And Ginny, I know you watched me try to work through this when we were working on the 401 Liberty special tax assessment.
Mhm.
Just that if we're granting some tax relief that's on the basis of a commitment for a company or entity to provide some level of full-time jobs with a certain level of payroll associated with that, how do we confirm that that's actually happening in exchange for the relief and taxes that we've granted them? So, and just to share with you, Kim and I have talked about setting up a regular, twice a year sort of deep dive on where we are on the TIFs to make sure that things are going on track and that we're able to follow up and intercept things before they become problematic.
Mhm. So this one also, I just have to point out, and I don't know, I think maybe we should actually get our calculators out on this, okay? Because this one was very, very clearly defined here. As phase one, there was going to be no change. And that's $1,118,500. I'm just going to look at 2019. The tax rate was 22.36. For
On one property.
okay. So if everybody wants to do that together, you divide
Phase one now.
1118.5, and then you times that times the tax rate, which was 22.36.
I don't see that on, I don't
Looks
see
like
that. It looks like,
2341.
yeah. Yep.
Pardon me?
The
Tax-
tax rate is 2341.
I think though that was just the tax rate at the time of the agreement. Usually when that happens, we don't know what the tax rates are going to be, so they just put in the tax rate as
Right.
2341 for the remainder, but it will adjust.
But the actual tax rate, I'm telling everyone, that year was 2236. So on phase one, they should have been taxed $25,000.99, just doing the adjustment. And then on phase two, which was $1,454,200. So you're at 80%. So you subtract $1,454,200, and you can do this on your calculators if you want. 454,200 minus 20% equals $1,163,360 times the tax rate times 22.36 equals. Oh yeah, you divide it by 1,000. You divide by 1,000. I'm sorry. After you subtract that, you divide by 1,000 and multiply it by the tax rate. The number for 2019 is $6,503. They should have paid $31,512, and they actually paid $22,671. So they underpaid by $22,671. And the next year, they underpaid by $21,021. And in 2021, they underpaid and were billed underpaid by $3,648. I think that we have to understand that and I thought we can't go backwards. I don't think. I don't really know that because I don't know that much about the tax law. But I did the calculations myself, and they're not, it doesn't add up. And Director Gilman, you're our math wizard, but I've done them 5 or 6 times. I think that's correct.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Kelly, do you disagree with those calculations?
You mean Kim?
Kim, I'm sorry. Kim, do you disagree with those calculations?
I don't have in front of me what was done for those years, so I can't compare to what was done. So I guess I can't answer your question because I didn't bring this folder with me.
Okay. Can I just say that it would be helpful if Counselor Disorder comes up with some figures, if you could say yes or no. Yes, you're correct, or no, you're wrong. It would help the rest of us
Well,
get us to what's going on.
I just have to
We were going to
interject.
get as
Kim has
detailed
to-
as this on each of these properties, so I didn't bring. I'm not in my office, so I can't bring all these folders with me.
Okay, and I understand.
It should be done ahead of time and not like on the spot. Kim
Okay,
should be given the
That's fine,
information
Director
prior.
Gilman.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Absolutely, I agree. But I think maybe we should have those calculations done for our next meeting, because I see on this, for the past 3 years, I did it several times, and I do believe that we're off by about $45,000 or $50,000. And
So
so
not to interrupt, but I also I feel like if there was a mistake made, okay, we should figure out what it is and see if we can fix it.
yes,
I also feel like let's not beat a dead horse. If there was a
Okay.
mistake made, then let's move on and you know what I
Absolutely.
mean? So I mean,
I'm good with
when
that.
looking at these with MJ, we're doing the same thing. We're looking at what has happened in the past versus what we are now. So I just don't want to continue on beating a dead horse, and I'm not trying to discount anything. I don't want anyone to feel like, I'm trying to avoid anything. Because if a mistake was made, then great, fine, but not great, but fine. Let's fix it and move on. Let's not keep pointing fingers at who and when, and because in cases those people are not here anymore to work on these. They haven't been here. I know that in this case, these years I was here, I was the assessor. But I'm just saying in general, let's not point fingers. Let's not beat this to death. Let's fix what maybe have done wrong if something was done wrong and move on.
That is, I absolutely agree with that. And my intent was not to beat a dead horse by any matter of means, or to dwell on something, because actually every day I get up, in all honesty, and I make mistakes on a daily basis. So I'm not one for doing that. I just am concerned because we're going forward, and these are the years, they're the most recent years, but they also are ones where their TIF is declining, and it matters to the taxpayers of the city that the businesses are paying the share that they're supposed to. But absolutely, let's go onward.
All right. We're done with Ford Toyota?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Okay, so Decker Machine Works is the next one. And Decker was in a TIF and they withdrew from it in fiscal year 2021. I'll share with you that we found that out as I was looking for their annual report back in February or early March, and called the state, and they said that they had been withdrawing. And I received information from the state in July that was a letter that Decker had sent a letter to the state withdrawing from the TIF. The EACC accepted that withdrawal, and we were never notified by MLBD or EACC until we were following up on it ourselves. So that's where we are with them.
Yes, Councilor Forgy.
Okay, so what happens when somebody withdraws from the TIF?
So on our side of things in the assessor's office, they would go back to 100% fair market value. The new growth would be picked up, and they would continue getting taxed until another agreement was worked out, I would think, with the TIF committee, if another agreement was worked out with the TIF committee. I think under strange circumstances, such as something like COVID, if there was a year that was not met, then I think that would be up to the TIF committee as to what to do in that case. But if if someone says flat out, I'm withdrawing, or, they write up whatever they need to do, then it would go immediately back onto the tax rolls with the growth added.
And is there a reason why they're withdrawing? Are they unable to meet the terms of the TIF?
Yes. Did I include the letter to you?
I thought you did.
I thought
I have a lot of paperwork, so whoever
At the
sent
very-
what to whom.
they're no longer on track to reach our projected target for the full-time permanent employees despite their efforts.
Yeah.
And so they asked to be withdrawn from that.
Yeah, I was sorry. I was guessing that's probably the reason, because I remember Decker was someone who was going to use tech students, and when
Yeah.
COVID happened and stuff, I bet
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
big yeah.
Yeah.
Mention that.
So basically, because somebody withdraws from their TIF doesn't mean they're going out of business.
Right.
It just means that they're abandoning the agreement they made with the town, and the town is just gonna charge them back on their tax rate,
Correct.
the
Yeah.
non-TIF rate. Okay.
Right, because the state's gonna find out, they're gonna catch them anyway, because they're gonna see that they haven't, met that employment piece. So I know that we went through that with Ford and Toyota a little bit in the beginning, because they too use tech students, but they use some part-time, and that wasn't the agreement. So we had to
Right.
speak to them about, getting more of those students full-time if they wanted to keep their job.
So I'd just like to um, throw something out. Um, I feel very strongly that these are very important things to enter into a partnership with business.
Mhm.
What at this point is unclear, and what you've mentioned a couple times, is that you're working on a policy and procedure piece to this. So my question, I mean, right now, I would not say we've got a lot of people banging down the door to build new buildings and do manufacturing pieces and everything else. This used to be, in part of what the planning department used to do. Now I know there's not a multiple person planning department in place. But if this piece had to be assigned, where is the appropriate place for it to be assigned to? Because I mean, Kim's our assessor.
Mhm.
So I mean, there's a piece that would be contributed by that office, but and I know you're working really hard on lots of other things. Is there a plan when you go through this and everything else to assign this responsibility to a specific department or personnel?
It's my understanding that my job as the economic development director, it sits on my desk right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And we do that in consultation with the TIF committee, and that's the local committee that has been created that does the review and the early on negotiations with any sort of business or company that's looking to seek this type of incentive. And then it's presented to city council. And then once the agreement is finalized, then the assessor picks it up to implement it. But there's that annual reporting piece that we need to stay on top of.
Thank you.
and I totally
Just to
agree.
share, I see that as my responsibility, tracking down and making sure that we're getting the reports, sharing those with him. And then we've just set up a twice a year process where we're doing a review and making sure that we've got all the reports, that they're meeting the terms of their agreements. There is clearly language in all the agreements that says we understand that economic conditions change a little, so we'd rather get into a conversation earlier rather than later if you're not meeting the goals. The state has generally said that they when a new TIF cap comes on board, they're generally looking for the employment numbers to be accomplished within the first 2 years. So, like I said, we're just trying to set up some sort of regular annual, reporting and monitoring process to make sure that there's that the company's getting the benefit, but that the town is also getting their fair shake in this. So.
Thank you.
So I have more questions on this because this one, when this came to us and we agreed upon it, I asked you for the initial value of this. At the time of the agreement with EACC, the building was on the tax rolls for $1,452,000. And in that year, they paid $31,668. I've been in touch with, while you were away, Deborah Boronsky, who was,
Mhm. She's our MLBD director.
Yes, she's fabulous. And so she sent me their agreement. Decker agreed that the land, the 3.01 acres, was valued at $310,000, and that it would never that would never depreciate. The building in the agreement was valued at $415,000, and as part of the agreement, they had, according to Deborah, they were going to do all kinds of investments into it. Since then, I have no idea, actually, how we have done this, but I can tell you that at the time in 2016 or 17, what they were valued at, and they paid $31,000. In 2020, they were billed and paid $3,977. and the property was valued at $173,000, at 173,480. And in 2021, it was valued at $281,000, and the taxes were $6,775. It's on 3 acres. It's an 18,544 square foot commercial building with 3 half baths. I too read his note and I found it heartwarming and honest. He was not able to meet the staffing requirements, and was very, honest in his whatever. But I thought this appears to me that first normally we would be reporting new growth because someone has withdrawn from the TIF, and this has markedly decreased, or I don't know what you have on it. That's just actually what we have on our paper. But I do know what they've paid for taxes. When I actually looked at the chart, they were supposed to get a total of certainly nothing close to that figure. So I don't know what to say about that.
I do agree, Ginny. I think something happened to this one because, first of all, immediately something isn't right because the land value should not have been discounted because the TIF value should be on only buildings. So unfortunately, I don't know what happened with this one. We did in 2020, we did have an issue with our computer system. Discounting a handful of properties that were found. And I'm wondering if this might have been one of those that was not found. Because I absolutely agree with you that something happened in 2020 here. And it looks as though it may have continued into 2021 as well, because just looking at the land alone, it should not have been touched. And I see that that is the case. This is one that MJ and I have already started a little bit of a deeper process on. So, this was something that we noticed, and, we will continue to dig in and see what happened. Obviously, it needs to get fixed immediately. And so I don't really know what to say either, other than the fact that we've already started working on what happened here and why. I guess it doesn't really matter at this point as to what happened and why. It's a matter of how do we get it fixed. So I do agree that something's not right here.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kim. And MJ, thanks for, I hope it was okay that I called you by your first names because I keep slipping.
Yes.
Apologize.
Me a little and call me something else.
I'm trying my best here. But I think of us all as real people who are really trying to do this to the best and of our ability. And we just want to make sure that we take care of the overall. So onward.
And I think, Ginny, to your point, just to sort of put, people may look at that and look at me and say, how on earth could you miss something like that? But I also just want to point out that there are just under 8,000 parcels plus personal property. So something to this nature, I don't want to say it's easily missed, but I also don't want to say it's easily picked out either. So, I apologize. I don't mean to get angry when we talk about things in the past, but there are things that we have no control over that happened in the past. So, I just want to point that out, just say that, like you said, Ginny, all of us make mistakes. And so, I don't want to say that this was even a mistake. I don't know what happened here. I don't know what happened on the other property. Something that needs to be, it's been addressed. We're looking into it. We're trying to figure it out and fix it for fiscal year 2022. And maybe in process that actually ends up adding some new growth that we weren't expecting. So just want to put that out there as well.
Right, because thank you so much. And this will be a year that we maybe can recoup some of that with adding all of that to the new growth, because I'm just looking out as we all are. We're just
Right.
looking, I just happen to be kind of a nerd with the numbers. Director Gilman can tell you that. I think one of the first times she met me, she was like, what made you add those 4 figures with the students in the school? I said, my dad was an accountant. I add everything. So it's just the way it is. I have actually always liked numbers. But I like people a lot too. And that's what we all are. So onward, let's go on to the last one because we're all reach a saturation point at some point. So,
Well, and I'm glad to report that the last one is expired in fiscal year 18. So it's not a current TIF.
However, I do have some notes, and I can start out with something in that direction. Ginny had asked a few questions of me, and I didn't get a chance to email them back to you all, which I can do if that's something of interest. But the very last question that was asked had to do with both FW Web and Valley Steel. So if you're all okay with it, I can answer those questions and start there.
yes, if you want to answer those last 2, that would be great because, and then because I don't like, I try not to run past 8 because I think we all get, we're all tired and numbers aren't easy and you've all already put in, almost everybody here has put in more than a day's work. So
I can also let me answer those 2 quickly, and there's only 3 others. I can whip through them really quickly, and then if there's questions, I'd be happy to either take them or take emails. I can email this to you so you guys can see it, and just go from there. So let me just quickly. So the question that was asked was, what was the new growth figure reported to the DOR for the FW Web TIF? What was the new growth figure reported to the DOR for Valley Steel? And it says their new construction in 2018 totaled 1.8 million. And the request of sharing the LA 13 where the growth was reported was requested. My question was, I'm not sure where the $1.8 million came from in new construction. I was trying to figure out where that figure came from, and I don't know. But what I can report, unfortunately, these are 2 of the properties that the new growth was missed in the fiscal year 18. But again, something that we are absolutely looking for in the future situations. Just trying to quickly move through things. We just talked about Decker. As we know, they've withdrawn from their TIF agreement. The question was pretty much the same. What's the new growth and is it going to be on the LA 13? And yes, Ginny, you are correct that the LA 13 is where new growth is put in on Gateway. So the new growth figures for Decker will be added to the LA 13 for this fiscal year, which is 2022. And it will be taxed at full and fair cash value. So those are just very quick, kind of going along with what we were talking about. Then the next was exempt properties returned to the tax roll includes TIF properties and constitutes new growth. The Greenfield Corp on Munson Street, prior to its TIF, what was it originally assessed for? Their TIF will be ending this year. When the TIF ends, approximately what will the new growth be added to the tax rolls? And we're looking for a dollar amount. So my response is that there are 2 parcels associated with this TIF, as we just discussed. The first one is parcel map R41, lot 36. This is 143 Munson Street. So included in the TIF, this TIF was implemented in fiscal year 2003. And the total assessed value was for 2002, so before the TIF was implemented, was $561,600. The second parcel associated with this particular TIF is map R41, lot 37, and that's the 101 Munson Street. This was also implemented in fiscal year 2003, so the total value in 2002 before the TIF was included was $5,656,300. So this TIF expires in the fiscal year 2022, which is where we are currently. So they will receive their last exemption in 2022. So it will not be added back into the tax roll until 2023. So at this point, I can't give you this figure of what the tax dollar will be going onto the tax roll once it's fully taxable again, because I don't have final values for fiscal year 2022 nor a tax rate. So at this point, I can't really begin to estimate what it would look like, for fiscal year 2023. So I'd like to revisit this question if that's okay. Once we get our final tax values and our final tax rate, then we can sort of look at least what this year looks like and what the potential for next year could look like with this year's tax rate, knowing that that's obviously just an estimate. So just trying to quickly move on because I totally understand the 8 o'clock thing. I want to go home too. So the next question that was asked was where and how it's recorded when our assessing firm inspects the property. So I also just want to point out that RRG is not the only person that does, or the only group of people that does the inspections. I'm also doing inspections. But on each of the record cards, there's an activity tab, which, can you share that for a minute? MJ will share this. I can show you if you have the record cards in front of you where to look for this. And this is where we record any forms turned in, mailed out, any inspections, any field reviews, anything that we do, and it's manually entered. The information that's given would be the type on the record would be the type of inspection, the type of form turned in, if there was a mailing sent, and if there was no response. So if you can scroll over all the way the other way, all the way the other way, scroll down slightly. Okay, so at the bottom of this page, the red words that say activities, that right there is going to tell you this particular property in March of 2020 turned in their income and expense form. In February of 2019 turned in their income and expense form, so on and so forth. Just recently they updated the results, which is the code of whatever it is that we did. So you don't actually see, like 3 is a full inspection. Unfortunately, that doesn't show anymore. But if there's ever question on that, please feel free to reach out to me. So anyway, this is where any sort of action is recorded of any sort. And then very quickly, the lengthy question that was asked was, what is the city's definition of these physical conditions of a property? Excellent, very good, good, average, fair, poor, and very poor. And the DOR was suggesting that this be asked of us. So very quickly, we have excellent, which is extensive interior and exterior renovations and replacement, restoring the property to its original condition or better, and in most cases you're going to get better. Very good is interior and exterior remodeling, renovations, and replacements. Good / very good is received better than normal exterior maintenance, remodeling such as windows, siding, roofing, trim, etc., plus additional renovations on the interior such as replacements like kitchens, bathrooms, flooring, so on and so forth. The next step down would be good. This is receives better than normal exterior maintenance, just like listed as above, with the roofing, windows, siding, so on and so forth. And very good plus interior updating, such as flooring, cabinets, countertops, those types of fixtures. Average good would be normal maintenance and conditions such as replacement windows, siding, roofing, countertops, etc. By normal, because I know normal is a funky term, we mean you're not putting marble countertops, marble flooring. You're just putting average. At this point, at this day and age, average may be some sort of a stone. If it's not a very expensive stone, it could be laminate countertops. It could be something to that nature. And again, average is pretty much as listed as above. It's just you're just keeping your house together, maintenance. Their average is some normal maintenance, but there's still needs for improvements. You may replace your roof because you have to, but your siding is sort of hanging off your house, or it doesn't look great. Thayer is complete deferred maintenance, still in need of major improvements, possibly an old roof, possibly old siding, possibly old windows, older kitchens and baths, so on and so forth. Poor is in need of repair. It's very clearly not well kept. And then you have very poor, which is in dire need of repair. This is to the point where it's like probably been abandoned, not quite sure, possibility. Potentially someone lives in it, maybe an older person or someone who just doesn't care and doesn't update or doesn't have the money to update. And then you have your dilapidated, which I know that wasn't in your list, but I wanted to make sure to put that on there too. Dilapidated is very rarely used. This is literally like you could blow it over yourself. It's falling down. It's disgusting. It's like absolutely like don't even go near it because if the wind hits it might fall on you. Very rarely used, but I just wanted to put that in there too. So again, that's all the questions. I'll make sure that you all get a copy of this. I got these late. I didn't have enough time to get them answered and to you all. So I'll make sure to do that. And I will also go back and look at anything that I needed to get you, like the record card for Munson Street and so on.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for all your hard work and attention to detail for all of my numerous questions. Thank you all, actually, everybody for giving up putting the time and energy into tonight. And so go and enjoy the rest of your night, unless anybody else, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Does anybody else have any further comments or questions? Councilor Elmer.
Well, I for one learned a lot, and I was going to move to adjourn.
Georgie.
I second that.
Before you close, I just remind you, once you get these comments that the answers to these questions, feel free to email me if you have questions. I haven't heard a whole lot from the last council meeting. Only one person actually has reached out to me with stuff. So please, if there's things you have questions, let me know.
Okay.
Certainly we will. And
Thank
let's just take a vote on adjourning, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And thanks again. Oh, all right, this meeting is considered adjourned.
At 8:04.
8:04, there you go, okay?
Thank
Very
you.
official.
Good night, everybody. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.
Thank you so much.